We are starting off the day strong with our last keynote. It is an honor to have Hans Meyer, founder and CEO of Zoku, here with us today. Hans Meyer is a forward-thinking leader for hospitality and has built a reputation for challenging industry norms and developing award-winning, globally recognized brands like Citizen M and Zoku.
Please join us in welcoming Hans Meyer on stage.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so glad I'm here because I always love to have conversations with students because actually I learn a lot from students. I always call myself a mentor, so it's kind of a combination of a mentor and an intern. So very happy to be here. Also very nice to meet again Stowe Shoemaker, who was my tutor 25, 30 years ago, somewhere around that in Singapore. Learned me about guest experience. So the work you actually see here today is also part of his work, so a big applaud for him. Thank you. The world doesn't need more stuff, it needs smarter solutions. It has been my personal mantra for the last 25 years. And what I think is interesting, this talk is about innovation and entrepreneurship, but what I've learned over the last, well, say 20 years, I would love to share with you as well. And with regards to innovation and entrepreneurship, there are two things which are very much important. It's the person and it's the problem. And what I've learned about innovative people and innovative entrepreneurs, they have certain characteristics. They are people who are able to think different. They are very passionate about what they do. They're very curious. They want to find out why certain things wouldn't work. They have a lot of energy and they have a lot of persistence. And most of the time, they're also a little bit naive, like I am. Because if you do such a trajectory like Citizen M or Zoku, at some point, there are so many hurdles before you come to finalizing this innovation that you should have something in yourself that you're very positive. You say, we're going to make it happen. And that's actually why you're able to take over these kind of hurdles. What is also interesting is the problem. You should have a problem. If there's no problem to solve, you will never have a kind of an innovative, financially sustainable company. So you should have a certain frustration. You should have a kind of a certain thought why this hasn't been solved so far. And I will share with you a story I read before I started Citizen M. Most hotel bedrooms are boringly similar. As you enter, the bathroom is on the left and the wardrobe is on the right, or vice versa. A couple more steps and you reach the bed, and opposite to that there's a desk with the television, and depending on the number of stars the hotel has, the ever overpriced minibar. There's often seating corner with one or two armchairs, although those are hardly ever used because most hotel guests prefer to watch television, sitting or lying on the bed. So what I felt when starting at Citizen M, because I worked for corporate hotel chains before that, and at some point I wanted to innovate, but I also learned that innovation within a big company is pretty difficult, because there often you get a resistance from a financial guy or an operations guy, or somebody says this is not going to work. And what I found pretty interesting is that in affordable hotels, you get affordable room, you hear the noise of the neighbor, there's a lot of, the air conditioning isn't working, you need to take a shower in the corridor. And in the five-star hotels, it's completely opposite. But if you dive into people, in any hotel, everybody wants to have a great night's sleep, a great shower, and fast Wi-Fi. And this is about 20 years ago. So where normally affordable and luxury excludes each other, I found it incredibly interesting to bring those worlds together. And that's where Citizen M basically come from, affordable luxury for the people. After Citizen M, I started to work on Zoku. And what I would love to do with you is a little bit how you actually can develop such a concept. If you have a certain idea in your life that you want to innovate, if you want to develop such a concept, in any case, I can tell you the things that I've been learning over the last few years. What is very much important is that I know that a lot of people here, especially in Lausanne, they are very much focused on finance. And I think at the end of the day, money talks. So finance is incredibly important. But I've got a little bit of kind of a reversed approach. My vision is not, I never start with an Excel sheet. At the end of the day, there are people who actually are going to use my products, who are going to like it, yes or no, going to recommend it to their friends and peers or whatever, and are prepared to pay a certain price for that. So first one thing, I always take people as a starting point, and if I do it right, the finance will come by itself. Second thing, what I always try to do is create more value at less cost. It's not difficult to make something more luxurious or to make something more cheaper. But it's interesting how you find this challenge to make things to create more value, but at the same time do it smarter than the rest of the world and create what we call a kind of a blue ocean around this. So I'm going to tell you more about Zoku. And the first thing, what you do, if you work on a new concept, is that you basically open up your perspective. You basically say what's happening in the world. And it's not that difficult to innovate, but the only thing you should be curious. So there were three fundamental trends behind Zoku. First of all, that the world is becoming fluid. Who of you can understand that you work from home nowadays? Raise your hands. It's quite logical. Who of you buys something online from the couch? So in any case, what you see is that the world is actually becoming more fluid. I mean, there's so many nationalities here, and I'm absolutely sure that many of you, they're going to work internationally. So that's one. Second is that space is incredibly expensive, especially in city center areas. So you have to think about how can I use space in a much more efficient way. The hotel rooms of Citizen are just 13.5 square meters, as big as a 20 feet high cube shipping container, very small. We also wanted to redefine how we use space within Zoku, which I will tap into in a minute as well. But on one side, there's scarcity of space, but on the other side, there's an abundance of space, which I will tap into later on. And then, of course, ESG at the forefront. So we also wanted to make sure, together with Mark, my co-founder, that Zoku also would be a very sustainable company. The mission of many hotels is putting heads in beds. Our mission from day one was to connect and inspire people. And in order to do so, we defined a very clear target audience. With Zoku, we focus on people who need to live and work in a city between a few days and a few months. That's completely different than Citizen, where you basically stay between a late night dinner and an early flight the next morning. And in order to really understand your target audience, I started to do interviewing 150 people from the target audience. So for example, Pascal, who worked for 35 different countries in just 5 years for Microsoft. And I just wanted to listen not only what they want, because often people don't know what they want, but they can be very clear about what frustrates them and what they don't like. And after this 150 interviews, I basically took one big conclusion, is that people who need to live and work in a city where they don't know anybody, where they don't know the city, where they don't speak the language, they start to feel disconnected after a few days or weeks. They are feeling lonely. 21% of business travelers, even on short haul, they feel lonely during travel, and especially 46% of business travelers for longer periods, they recognize this feeling of loneliness. After these 150 interviews, I truly wanted to understand my target audience even better. So I stepped out of my own shoes, stepped into the shoes of my target audience, and basically worked and lived internationally. 2 months Buenos Aires, 2 months Washington, D.C., 2 months Bali. It wasn't a bad lifestyle at all. It was great. But also it learned me a lot that how important it is to really understand your target audience, because the hotel industry often says, everybody should feel at home in my place, but I don't believe that. I prefer to be big in a small market than to be small in a big market. And we ended up with Zoku, which is a Japanese word for family, tribe, or clan. And Zoku was a subcultural phenomena in Japan of the 1970s, where people with the same lifestyle started to live together. So that's the title that we basically took, because those were all people who were living and working internationally, being in the same boat. What is Zoku? Zoku is a hybrid between a home and an office, also suitable for long stays, topped with hotel services and the social buzz of a thriving neighborhood. What I said previously, two problems that I wanted to solve. And the first problem is solving this disconnectedness. And I love this picture because this is a campsite. And the nice thing, everybody puts a tent, and in the middle there's kind of the space where there are barbecues and fire pits, guitar playing, and what have you. And the only place that got that well within the hospitality industry were hostels. Who of you stayed in a hostel? Okay. What I like about hostels is that you jump out of your bunk bed and then you say to yourself, I'm going into town, but you're grabbing a coffee, and then 2 hours later you're still on that big table with a lot of people that you didn't meet before. But at a certain age, you don't want to sleep in a bunk bed anymore. You don't want to have a shower in the corridor anymore. You want to have a little bit more, maybe luxury, whatever. So that was a kind of an idea that we wanted to grasp how you actually can connect people with each other. Now, we forced ourselves to keep on listening to our target audience. So this is the first session we had. 290 people from the target audience actually helped us to develop Zoku. It's not a one-man show, it's not a two-man show, it's not a 10 people show. We got 290 fathers and mothers who actually help us to get ideas, to validate it, and to create it. So what we did here is we defined the initial guest experience. This is already quite some time ago, but when I started Citizen, we did the same thing with guest journeys. It was completely new in our industry. At that time, we took a building as a starting point, then we made a kind of a floor plan, and at the end of the day, we needed to squeeze in a guest. And this was a kind of reversed approach, is what do you want our guests to feel, taste, smell, see, hear when they're arriving in this hotel and throughout the entire experience. So before we were looking into a building, before we were looking into a design, you basically develop the entire guest journey. And then I went to a copywriter. And I said to the copywriter, can you create one nice story around that? And I went to a visual marketeer. Can you grasp me the picture that actually fit to that? So before we started designing, we already had the end goal in mind, and we were able to canalize all this energy towards this great goal. Then we started to build models on a small scale, how this could look like. We painted we took a floor in an industrial area and we painted all the facilities on the floor. We were able to move around, we were able to test it, and then we send over people from Booking.com, for example, or Netflix. They come over in pizza sessions and they basically tested the model. So this is also one of the first models we had in Zoku Amsterdam. And then we created basically the social spaces within Zoku. And in social spaces, the objective was to facilitate effortless connection between people, to bring a lot of green, to bring a lot of daylight, because people feel well. So that's why in Zoku Amsterdam, the first one, we built this greenhouse on the top of the roof. We built terraces and a lot of plants and lots of daylight. Then the welcome area. If you talk about facilitating effort connections, you don't want to have a big reception desk where there's already a border between me and the staff. Basically, you want to make the communication very informal. And that's why you arrive at Zoku at a welcome bar, coffee bar, where you can just grab a coffee and you are welcomed by the baristas. You can do your own check-in by yourself on the sites. And if you stay for longer, we can help you with a check-in if you have certain questions. Then we created this living room and co-working spaces. So we started with living room, but what happened is that people also started by themselves to work there during the day. So in many lobbies, the spaces are basically empty during the day. There's always life here at Zoku. Then with regards to food and beverage. Now, if you know a lot about operations, you know that food and beverage is for many hoteliers a headache. It's the most complicated part. They often don't make a lot of money out of it. But if you look to your target audience, the one single activity in the world which is truly social is eating and drinking with each other. So that's why we created the living kitchen here, of course for breakfast, lunch and dinner, but also here we have the weekly community dinners where we bring people together. Then we have integrated hybrid spaces that can be used during the day as co-working and for play during evening and night times. and of course also meeting and event spaces. The second problem that we wanted to solve is functionality. If you stay in a location for a few weeks, you don't want to end up in a cramped hotel room with a small desk where you actually cannot work. So we wanted to create a space where people could live comfortably and work efficiently at the same time. And the biggest innovation at Zoku is also a very simple one. In 99.9% of the hotel rooms and studio apartments worldwide, the bed is the most dominant piece of furniture. And that's why you never invite somebody over into that space. But if you want to stay there for a few weeks or months, it might be nice to invite somebody over for lunch or dinner or a meeting, what have you. So we created this spacious micro apartment in the same size of a normal hotel room, so 24 square meters. We basically built an entire house. Because what I said previously, you have to be smarter than the competition, because at that time apartments were often 35 to 40 square meters, so 350 to 400 square feet. In our industry, it's very common to build a prototype room. And building prototype rooms is incredibly expensive. So what I've learned in the last 20 years, I don't look to a lot of innovations in the hotel industry. I want to learn from other industries. So for example, for Citizen M, the fashion industry who made fashion affordable for a lot of people like Max and Zara and H&M, I wanted to make the boutique hotel experience affordable for many people. And with regards to Zoku, we basically wanted to do the same thing. And that's why, for example, I learned a lot from lean startup principles, meaning a minimal viable product. So, this is the minimal viable product. It was the idea for this Zoku loft, as we call it, which would fit on my hand. And then I went to Booking.com and Netflix and all those prospective clients and said, what do you think about this? Would you like your people stay here? How much would you be prepared to pay? And how long do you think that people would stay here? And after that initial iteration, which was just costing us a few €100 instead of €100,000, which is a normal prototype, fully equipped out, you actually see how it basically was built up. Because basically what we did, we stacked all the different functions that you find in a normal home onto each other, and the rest of the space is actually living space. And here you actually see that we've hidden the bed, and the kitchen table becomes the most dominant piece of furniture, or paramount, where you have a cappuccino or where you work. So living space and sleeping area. This is another room type, basically because we want to create a modular furniture system that you can do in different configurations. And after that, we built those models on a real-life scale with very cheap materials. And every single prototype was tested by 2 housekeeping companies, because I see many people thinking what's happening with the bed, and 150 people from the target audience. So basically, we kept them asking, what do you think about it? How are you going to use this? So here are all the different prototypes we actually built. And then we also started to experiment with different materials. So instead of 1 prototype, we built 6. The last prototype, we did validation with mobile EEG scanning and cameras. So people got brain scanners on their heads and cameras, and we were able to measure 2 emotions, anxiety and excitement. And I've got a nice movie about that. You just see a kind of a small snapshot how that actually works. So she has never seen the room. We didn't give her any explanation. And what you actually can see, she, well, pretty intuitive, knows how to open the stairs. But then she's getting stuck. So the anxiety monitor went beyond. Not comfortable for her. And finally she was able to open it up. And the very simple learning we took is just put a small leather latch where you can put your finger in. And that was the same intuitive thing that people start to realize, I can open it up. Now, this was the Zoku loft. And the challenge with a new hotel brand is that you have to invest a lot of money in PR and launching a brand. Now, if you are a startup, you have the limitation, you don't have a lot of money. So again, you have to be a little bit smarter. So we created a story around this loft, and we called it the end of the hotel room as we know it. Very simple, because the bed was not the most dominant piece of furniture anymore. And we created a brand launch video, which I'm going to share with you now.
Welcome to Zoku, the end of the hotel room, the beginning of the infinite room, the workroom, the playroom, the come over to my place and make me smile room, the lay your head and launch your dreams room. Actually, this isn't even a room. It's one block of a thriving neighborhood, a hive of Zoku lofts and social spaces, designed for you to stay longer so you can go further. Meet, sleep, work, dream, love, live. Zoku.
It was picked up by Reddit over the weekend, got 2.2 million views, and then basically everything exploded. So even with not that much amount of money, you can have quite a lot of impact. And that basically campaign helped us to launch the brand just a year before we opened up in Amsterdam. Now, yes, Ronnie, are you here? Ronnie not here? Yeah. Yesterday I had a nice conversation with Ronnie. Was picking me up from the station, and we had a kind of a conversation about how do you connect with people. And then we had a conversation, if you travel for business, it's basically hard to connect with other people. Or think about if you go to a cocktail reception. On your own, you don't know anybody. Who of you loves to go to cocktail receptions on your own where you don't know anybody? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have got a kind of a challenge. You can imagine that if you come to a kind of a hotel where you stay for 2 weeks, you can have the same problem over there. And then again, going back to the disconnectedness, that's what we wanted to solve. So we have very active community management. We basically have a conversation with you, try to find out your interest, and we connect you with other people. We have daily fika, which is a Swedish ritual where people get free cakes and coffee, and they gather around a big table. We get weekly community dinners where you're invited as a long-stay guest to join in for free, and you meet a few other people. So basically what we do, we cross that first bridge, because if you know a few people from the staff, members from Zoku, other guests, then it's going to become easier. And we actually help you to build up your local social and professional network, which goes far beyond what traditional hotels are doing. We organize a lot of events, and definitely would love to invite you over to one of the events if you want. Then, of course, the sustainability part is a very important aspect. Mark and I had a conversation in 2018, and we said, okay, 10 years ahead, to what kind of company do we want to look to? Are we getting incredibly excited of 21% return on equity, et cetera, et cetera? We said, yeah, we want to build a financial sustainable company, but we also want to use our force for business for good. Because we actually put loneliness on the agenda, for example, in Amsterdam. There are quite a lot of internationals who went to Amsterdam and they basically said, Zoku saved my life here, and we're very proud of that, but also from a sustainability point of view. So the E part and the S part is very important within Zoku, and the G part, of course, but that's a kind of hygiene factor. 4 different properties. Zoku Amsterdam opened up in 2016. Zoku Copenhagen opened up during COVID, not the best time to open a hotel, you can imagine. Zoku Vienna opened up during COVID, not the best time to open a hotel, you can imagine. And Zoku Paris in 2023. I mean, if COVID wouldn't have happened, we would be around 9 now, but we had to reduce a little bit. But now we are ready for grow again. At the end of the day, I'm a hotelier. If you would ask me why I am a hotelier, I would say exactly the same thing as I would say during selection when I went to Hotel School The Hague. I said, I love to make people happy. It's a very simple, maybe boring statement, but it's really why I'm into this industry. And I actually can see it happening within Zoku, and not on that they get great coffee, but especially by the connections people are making. There was a woman from Booking.com. She stayed with us for 3 weeks. She came from Seattle, Asian woman, and she prepared in her loft a big Asian meal, and then put it on a tray and went up to the social space, to the kitchen, and put it in front of the chefs. And said, guys, you've taken so good care of me over the last few weeks, I want to take care of you tonight. So where the borders between guests and staff are actually disappearing, that you feel that you're in a friend's home, that's where the interesting thing kicks in. You see our review scores. If you compare us to the key competitors here in Europe, whether it's Hoxton, whether it's Citizen, whether it's Ennismore, whether it's Jace, whether it's Moxie, whatever, we have the highest review scores and we have the lowest standard deviation between those review scores. So very consistent product. And of course, you can tell a lot, and I can tell you a lot, but I think what the press said about Zoku, for example, one of the top 25 cruise hotels in the world, is of course very nice for the team who did an amazing job. Now, how is innovation happening when you already have a concept? What happened during COVID is that our market, international travel, basically vanished from day one. So our occupancy in Amsterdam went to 6% on average for the hotels, and half of the hotels basically closed down. What happened is that a big tech company in Amsterdam said, well, our people can go to the office or don't want to go to the office. Can we rent those lofts during the day? Because given the fact that the bed is hidden, I can use it as a kind of a workspace. And that made us think, what can we do more? So during COVID, in Amsterdam, all restaurants were closed. There was a lockdown. Half of the hotels were closed off, and we were fully booked. What happened? We created the biggest collection of Michelin-star restaurants in the world, where all of those lofts became a kind of a micro Michelin-star restaurant, where people who were staying, couples who were staying in that loft, were cooking, getting served a 4-course Michelin-star meal, but they need to finish 1 course via Zoom with the most famous Michelin-star chef we have in the Netherlands. So you saw 90 couples basically finalizing their last course under guidance of this Michelin-star chef. And in the evening, we had live music in the corridors and people were sitting 1.5 meter distance. So it was amazing to actually use your space differently. So what we've learned in Zoku is that a very interesting approach is that we are able, and now the financial people will love this, we are able to stack different business models on the same square meter during different moments of the week. If you would arrive at Zoku tomorrow, between 7 and 9, it's busy with people who are having breakfast. At 9 o'clock, the co-working members come in. They pay 200 euros per month to work at Zoku. At 5 o'clock, the internationals and the co-workers are going to mingle. And tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, we got open podium, open mic, and 150, 200 people show up to listen and enjoy the music. But we can also do that with the loft. Basically using it during the day as a private office and a meeting space, and during the night as a hotel room. Great example, Zoku Vienna is next to the conference center. Normally that hotel room does around 120, 130 euros per night. Vienna is not a very high price city. But during conference times, we sell that same space as a meeting space for 600 euros. And theoretically, we can sell the same space then during the night another time, which creates a lot of opportunities. So we are going to merge more towards workspaces because we feel that hospitality is becoming more important in workspaces. How do you get people to the office anyway? And at the same time, it's a very much interesting way of combining spaces because the peak levels of a hotel are completely different than the office peak levels. So you basically can combine them. And that brings us to a kind of a fundamental discussion. And I heard a few students here are working on underutilization. 2 weeks ago, I gave a talk in London, and I called it the sustainability blind spot, the big elephant in the room. Because we are investing billions in making buildings more sustainable, solar panels, smart energy systems, whatever, but we hardly ever talk about how little we actually use the space that we already have. So to give you a kind of an idea, office space is now used 38% of the time, but that's measured during a 40-hour work week. If you extrapolate that to 168 hours, you end below 10%. So 90% of office space is unused. Aviation contributes to 2.5% of CO2 emissions globally. Offices do 6 to 8% of CO2 emissions, while we all accept 90% empty. which you can talk about flight shaming. You could also argue whether you should talk about office shaming. So in any case, what we try to do with Zoku is use space far more efficient to reduce the CO2 emission per person. And then you have to think completely different about real estate, because we are used to single-use buildings, offices, retail, hotel, hospitals, what have you. There are a number of companies having mixed-use concept, like Social Hub, for example, but they still have different functions in different areas of the building. And we very much believe into hybrid use. And over the last 2 years, under the radar, we've been working on this new concept where we bring those worlds together, and very proud that I can share it with you here. So this is a prototype of such a building where you basically bring everything together. And imagine that you are in a zombie zone in San Francisco or Washington or London, where those offices are empty the bigger part of the week, where retail is going to disappear, and at the end of the day, where people don't want to be here anymore. Same thing with Zoku Amsterdam. Zoku Amsterdam, the location won a prize for the ugliest street in Amsterdam in 2013. It was a kind of a dead area during evening, nights and weekends, and there's life again. And that can happen with these kind of buildings. So this prototype, think then on the ground floor, you have facilities that contribute to the users of the building, but also to the neighborhood. And then in the middle there's a kind of an entrance. That's not this typical huge office atrium, which feels incredibly impersonal, but this is a kind of a cozy coffee area where also the neighbors can pick up the DHL pickup points. Maybe we have a flower shop or a bookstore or what have you integrated. But this is where you enter the building. And then in this building, we created a kind of a vertical that connects all the horizontal floors, but also vertically, in order to create bump into points where people actually are meeting each other. This is also the place where we have, for example, on a daily basis, this fika, where they can come together. Here in this building, you got a lot of those Zoku lofts that can be used for sleep, for 1 night, for 3 months, for private office, for meeting, for podcast studios, even Michelin star restaurant. And then also we integrated workspaces. We work together with Leesman, which is a company from London-based. They measure employee satisfaction in their home office and their workplace. And we gathered all those data and developed this office concept. And the interesting part is here is that now many companies, they rent office space based on their maximum required capacity. It's often a Tuesday and a Thursday. Monday and Wednesday they need less, so lots is unused. On Friday it's dead, and the rest of the week it's dead as well. We give companies the opportunity to rent space on their minimum required capacity, and during the week they can extend their office space. And that means we increase the utilization, we give companies the flexibility, but at the same time we can create far more value over there. Then on the top floor, there's meeting and event spaces. A big reason for people come together to the office is actually to meet each other, to share knowledge and ideas like we do here today, but also integrate roof terraces, lots of green, and those kind of hybrid spaces. And then also you want to be able to have a decent meal here, very much health focused, organic. It's all happening here in the living kitchen. And although you got small social areas on the floors, this is the key social space where you can also come together. And last but not least, the big greenhouse with roof gardens. So this concept has been tested with the bigger companies like Google, a lot of Miro, a lot of other tech companies, real estate professionals, and nobody actually could say why this vision doesn't work. The only thing what you ever now have with innovation, and I'm used to a little bit resistance, that it doesn't fit in a box. From a fund manager, I said, I'm doing hotels in this office, where do I fit it in? From a bank, from an investor, from a municipality, from a building regulations. But I've seen so many hurdles and learnings through Citizen and Zoku that nowadays I'm pretty relaxed that also for this, if the ideas are good, we are going to find solutions. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. But I really appreciate it that you were listening here. Thank you.
questions if you want.
I can ask you. Okay. I'm. Yeah, I would love to ask a few questions, but please, if there are any questions or anything I said you don't agree with, or please go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You were just mentioning financial optimization and how many of your guests actually stay for longer. Trying to think about labor costs for housekeeping at Zoku. Is that a service that is offered on a daily basis, or if the guest necessarily has a longer stay, that is going to be spaced out or still going to be serviced daily? Just trying to think of if that is also an area in which you try to save some money in that sense.
Well, in any case, if I stay in an apartment, I don't want, or even in a hotel room, I don't want housekeeping every day. For me, it's completely not necessary to. So what we are going to, if people stay for longer periods, 3 months, every 7 days they get housekeeping. If people stay for 2 days, well, they get housekeeping every day. But we are currently experimenting because it's a very good point that we want to give people the opportunity to choose themselves at no extra cost. So that's basically how we're moving forward. Also, to be very honest, inflation went up faster than room rates over the last few years. Just to give you kind of an idea, our cost of payroll went up around 45% since 2019, which is substantial. So you have to think ways and you have to innovate that, but so far it doesn't hurt the guest reviews, especially because we give people the opportunity to choose themselves. You're welcome. Please.
I think this concept is fascinating and everything you're doing is so innovative and so new and unique. So I'm just really curious if you've seen other hotel brands and other companies kind of adopting this style. And I'm also curious in the future where you see this company moving and how you see yourself expanding and growing.
Nice question. Thank you so much. So Citizen M has still a kind of the connotation as being an innovative concept. This was actually created in 2003, so 22 years ago. Now, that means two things. Either the hotel industry doesn't innovate that fast, or I don't know what exactly the reason is behind, but I think that after that, quite a lot of other companies started to copy certain areas. So Radisson Red, for example, Moxie. I think that Holiday Inn Express even took certain aspects from that. So there will be copies. Also with Zoku, there is a room in Beijing, identically the same room as we have here, although it's a little bit a bad copy. But in any case, there are copies. But what I learned is that the hotel industry is not adapting that fast, which is a pity. Because I think there's a huge opportunity for I've got 4 empty lobbies if I would not do anything. But Wyndham and Marriott, they have thousands of great spaces that they actually are not using for the best possible ways, I think. And we actually defined our strategy going forward to your question with regards to growth, is converting existing office spaces. Amsterdam was an existing office space. We know that a lot of office space is becoming redundant. We also start to learn that owners start to realize that the values will go down and that actually we bring a lot of life in city areas. So our idea is now focused still on Europe. Our next location is hopefully London. We're looking for buildings over there. But definitely there was also before COVID a lot of appetite from the US, but we said, okay, first focus on Europe, but at some point I think it has global potential. Thank you. One more.
Good morning. Thank you for talking for us and explaining your brand. I think it's very fascinating and not really the traditional hotel business. So I'm wondering a bit more about your different positions that you have in the hotels. Because I saw, for example, you have a role called sidekick, which is not traditional for normal hotels. So I want to hear more about how you think about that.
Specifically about the sidekick?
No, just like your roles in the hotels. Like, do you keep the traditional roles, or are you trying to be more innovative?
Yeah. Already with Citizen, so in hotel industry, it's still very common. You got a general manager, you got an assistant general manager, you got an operations manager, you got a front office manager, you got a front office supervisor, you got a receptionist, and you got it in all those different departments. And what I learned is that also often, and I think there is just, I think in some hotels this works perfectly, and also some hotels you need it. But the question is how much management do you need from every role? So all those different layers. So already with Citizen, but also within Zoku, we got 3 layers. You got a general manager, you got a duty manager, and you got sidekicks. That's basically what we have. And that means also you don't have a fixed role. You're not always at reception. You're not always at F&B. Of course, we facilitate where you are happy most of the time, so we can do that. But we're very flexible with that. And the definition of a sidekick is a personal assistant or a confidant. So basically, somebody who is getting somewhere even close. It's also funny how you see this. If we do a staff event with Zoku, always a few members show up, always a number of long stay guests show up. So it's a kind of a different perspective on how you can staff it. What also is happening within Citizen and Zoku is that people are quasi-employees themselves. You pick up your plates, you put them in a cupboard instead of just leaving everything out. And it's something which is a kind of a culture within Zoku, which basically everybody is doing. There's also a limitation on the model, because the disadvantage is that growth is limited within our company. I mean, if you stay in a hotel for 20 years, you can make all those steps up. That's within Zoku. That's unfortunately not possible. So, for example, with regards to growth, we have a development program where we actually learn people things that you don't learn at school. So instead of the typical growing from a job point of view, we learn people about emotional intelligence, about empathy, how they build up a team, how they manage a team. And of course, many of you have learned that already, but we also have a lot of people working with us who touch base on that for the first time. So that's the way how we deal with people. By far, I mean, I can tell great stories about the design and the concept and the business model and the financial thing. The most enthusiastic I am with the people who are actually working for Zoku, because actually they make the concept. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hans Meyer. Let's give one more big round of applause for him.